Are you flat out and feel like your time is at the mercy of clients, team, and suppliers? If you want to feel in control again, then today I'm going to be talking about the most effective tool in reducing the number of hours that you work. And the best part is it's super simple. I'm Cam from Profitable Tradie, and today I'm going to be talking about how you can stop being reactive with your time and you can start being proactive with a tool called the default calendar. Now let's talk about what might be some of the problems that you're facing if you're not intentional about your personal productivity. Now you might feel out of control. Stuff just seems to keep happening to you. Life, clients, staff, merchants, they seem to be directing the traffic in your life and you seem busy in somebody else's game. And the busier you get, the more difficult it is to actually be productive. The mind is essentially fried or feels frozen because of all of the overwhelm. And it's difficult to concentrate, prioritize, and it feels easier just to do the jobs in front of you as you can tune everything else out. You can put those blinkers on, at least in the short term anyway. And you may have more to deal with each day and each week than you can actually hope to achieve. Caught in that job to job focus, and you can't focus on the long term. And you end up forgetting stuff. And to-do lists, maybe you don't even get to making them, and if you do, you barely get through them because the day-to-day ends up taking over. And you end up feeling exhausted and burnt out. Maybe it's even led to mental health issues, or maybe you're feeling completely over it, not even liking your own business or life anymore. But what can happen if you take control of your own personal productivity is you'll feel in control of your destiny. And then the feeling of control puts you into this resourceful state, rather than that life is kicking me around state of mind. You get the ability to get things done, and more importantly, the right things done. And that's going to improve significantly. You get more time to enjoy life, so more time to do things that you actually want to do. Maybe it's fishing, maybe it's surfing, maybe it's picking up that guitar that you haven't had and actually learn to play it for the last 12 years. You have more time to enjoy your family and actually be present with your friends and family. And the way to transform your business is to actually do the stuff that shifts the dial. It's the stuff that makes a difference, not just getting more jobs done. It's organizing and it's spending your time working on your number one job as the business owner, which is building your business. That's your job. So I'm going to be taking you through 5 key principles to getting this right. Now, the first one is understanding importance. Here's a tricky question. It's very easy to be good at getting stuff done, smashing through jobs on site. But what's most important to grow a great business is to be good at getting stuff done that's going to change your long-term results. Everybody does stuff that's important, but not everyone has the same definition of what important actually means. If we think about all behavior and what we value as important, that's driven by either pain or pleasure. And it's more often by pain, whether it's physical or emotional. And what we do is we move away from that pain and we move toward pleasure. And another psychological trait that informs how we judge importance is this thing called the immediacy effect or present focus bias. And when we consider a choice between 2 options that are in front of us, whether that being avoiding pain or gaining pleasure or reward, what we do is we tend to place a higher value on the option or the reward that's the most immediate. In other words, the current and the near future, they're incredibly powerful. They're much more powerful than the distant future. So pain or pleasure that's close in time is much more powerful than pain or pleasure that's much further away. So if we think about like exercising or eating, dieting right, smoking, investing, those things are much further away, and the result that we're going to get if we change that habit, it's quite a hard habit to change when we think about the short-term appeal of eating that donut. Another experiment that was run was called the marshmallow experiment back in the 1960s by Walter Mitchell at the Stanford University. What he did was he gave a treat, a marshmallow, to children, and he told them that if they could wait for 15 minutes, they could have a second treat. And what they did was they followed these subjects around over 40 years, and they found that the children who were willing to delay their gratification and waited to receive that second marshmallow, they actually ended up having much higher SAT scores, much lower levels of substance abuse, lower likelihood of obesity, better responses to stress, better social skills as reported by their parents, and generally better scores in a range of other life measures as well, which is super interesting. Pain versus pleasure and the immediacy effect together are a crazy lethal cocktail. And it causes us to focus on short-term pain avoidance and not prioritizing the things that are going to help us build long-term success and progress. In other words, you have to be really aware that we as humans are wired to think short-term, and it takes awareness and effort and focus on building a business for the long term. We actually have to recalibrate our brain and our understanding of what's important so that we factor in the long-term results and the stuff that will enable us to create a great business and a great lifestyle. Now, the second key principle is evaluation of opportunity cost. Now, the key to making good choices around how you spend your time is to understand the opportunity cost. We have two resources in life. One of them is time and one of them is money. One of those resources is renewable, which is money. And the other one, time, is a non-renewable resource. In other words, you can only spend each hour that you have one time. So we look at, well, what we want to look at is what is the cost of spending your hour doing activity A versus activity B. So an example might be, one option is to go and do an urgent job that needs to be done right now. The other option is we could go and visit a couple of builders who could potentially give us $200,000 worth of work in the next year. Both of those tasks are going to take you 2 hours, right? Which one would you want to pick? What's the most important? What's the opportunity cost of going to do that urgent job? You wouldn't give your money to anyone who asks for it, right? So we've got to think about, why would you do this with your time, especially if it's non-renewable? The third key principle is we need to choose our priorities. So that wiring in us makes us feel like we don't have a choice in a lot of these situations. But honestly, I say that's BS. If you had a family member right now that got into a car accident, you'd never say to anybody, hey, I don't have time to get there. If they rang you, you'd never say, I don't have time for you right now. But on the other hand, I've heard a few times in my time, I don't have time for building pricing templates. But when you say I don't have time for building pricing templates, it makes you feel like you have no control. It's kind of like the dog ate my homework excuse, right? We've heard that chestnut a few times. But what works better is to say building my pricing templates is not a priority for me right now. And what that does is it actually puts you at choice. Yes, you can't do everything, but if we invest time into improving our productive capacity, right, your team, your management, your systems, we can get more and more done. Building systems and growing your team is how you get more done and expand your ability to get more stuff done in total. The fourth key principle is to stop doing. So when you look at increasing our personal productivity, the critical question is most often not what should I be doing more of, it's often what should I be doing less of. What should I stop doing that's currently clogging up all of my time and preventing me from doing the stuff that's really important? Now for me, I haven't met many lazy business owners, none that get through to working with us anyway. So it's really about changing what we do that makes the difference. And remember, time is time. It's not just about work time. What can you lose from your personal life as well? Maybe you could get a cleaner. Could help stopping you from cleaning up after the kids on Sunday and actually spending some time with them. Could you outsource the shopping? Could you get a housekeeper to help with the evening meals? Could you get a student to sit in with the kids after school and help them with their homework? And then the fifth key principle is to create leverage. When you stop doing stuff, lots of stuff still actually needs to happen. It still needs doing. Right? For example, you got your on-site jobs that still need to be done. Managing projects, pricing, invoicing. We need to systemize and we need to delegate. That's how we create leverage. Getting more done with the same or with even less effort. Right? Systems and technology like job management software, team members that are empowered and skilled up to actually be able to do it. Now let's jump into how to actually put this thing together, the default diary. But let's first crack into what is it. Now what really is a default diary is it's a budget for your time or it's a template for your time. It's where the rubber meets the road. It's the time to choose the priorities, and we use it for all of our time, not just work, family, health, etc., etc. So what I want to do is just talk through the important details and make it as simple as possible at the start. And if you can't fit everything in, it's because there's actually more things there than you can actually do. and you realize that you have a lot less time than you actually think right now. And that might mean that it's time to start delegating or deleting some things. Now I'm just going to go through this example of a default diary, but what I'd love to do is just start off with a principle of why we build one of these. So there's a story from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People written by Stephen Covey, and it's this concept of a glass jar and fitting a few things inside it. So we got to think we've got some big rocks, some pebbles, and some sand, and we want to fit all 3 of them inside this glass jar. 2 ways you can do that. First way is you can pour the sand in, and it's going to make a block at the bottom of the jar. Pour the pebbles on top, it'll make another block, and then you can get all the big rocks and try to get them on top of the pebbles and the sand, and you'll probably notice that you can't really fit everything inside the jar. But if you do it the other way around and you start off with the big rocks, you get them all inside, you pour the pebbles in on top, the pebbles will fall in between all the little cracks between those big rocks, and then you pour the sand in on top, and the sand will find every little crack and crevice that it can to get inside that glass jar, and you have a much better chance of getting everything inside the jar. Now, how this represents for your time is the big rocks are like those big impact, hard-hitting, most important things that you need to get in there first because they take a reasonable amount of time. Now, in business, that might be things like building and implementing systems. It might be hiring and using a full hiring process. It might be learning about new things that you can get inside your business to move that needle. Now, your pebbles are like the operational tasks. So that's things like jobs getting done on site. That's things like the invoicing. That's things like payroll. They have to get done, but they don't really drive the business forward. And then you've got your sand. And the sand is like the distractions. So it's the stuff that pulls you away from the things you want to be doing. Now the sand's things like your phone calls with the team ringing you, and they want to know an answer to a question that they have on site, and you know they already know the answer, but they want to ask you anyway. It might be your big email inbox and trying to crack through that. It's the stuff, and maybe there's a bunch of emails in there that don't matter. They're pulling you away from what you want to be doing. And the problem with this is that even though most of us know that we shouldn't, most of us actually fill our time sand first because the sand often feels urgent. But what the default calendar is all about is getting the big rocks locked in so that they have to happen, and we've got to get them locked into our default calendar first so that they have to happen. So if we scroll down on the workbook, we've got a template that you can fill in as we go. And then below that, we've got an example, and I just want to talk you through this example of how we can fill in our default diary. Now, the things that I want you to lock in first are the most important 3 big rocks. Now, the first big rock that I want you to pop into your default diary is your lunch breaks. Now, it might seem silly, but the lunch breaks are so important to have in there for 2 main reasons. First, humans are like cars. We take fuel. And if you don't have the fuel inside you, you'll probably have some worthless afternoons. Now, I'm sure you can relate to this. Have you ever done a task that should take you about half an hour, you've skipped lunch, you go to do this task in the afternoon, and it ends up taking you about 2 or 3 hours instead of that half an hour? It's generally because you don't have the brain power to get you through that task. So that's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is that with this template of our time, it all has to add up and actually make sense, and you actually have to be able to do it each and every week. So for example, on this Monday, we've got on-site quoting and then a lunch break and then business development time in the afternoon. Now in this example, if we didn't have lunch in there, and it went just from on-site quoting all the way through to business development, and then we decided to take a lunch break, we're already making an exception to the default calendar. Now, if we did that 5 times in a week, that's 5 exceptions to the default calendar, and it becomes a pretty slippery slope to throwing that thing in the bin. So that's the first big rock that we want to lock into our default calendar. For the second big rock that I want you to pop inside your default calendar today, I want to ask you a question. Who's the most important client of your life? It's your family, right? And what happens to a really, really important client when you neglect them? They'll find somewhere else, yeah? I know it's morbid, but it's a really important issue that we need to make sure we're on top of with our time and our personal productivity. So what I want you to do is think about some family time that you want to commit to each and every week that you can lock into your default calendar, because it's really important that you're looking after the family, the most important client of your life. And if you can get even further than that, yourself as well. So maybe what are some hobbies, whether you go to the gym, whether you go for a run, whether you play any sports, or do something for yourself, whether maybe it's working on a car or something. it's really important that you're doing these things and having these things in your life that you want to make sure are in there. So this time is dedicated family time, right? It's the phones down, we're not checking emails, we're not answering phone calls. It's time where you can focus on your family in the moment. So that's the second big rock. The third big rock is your business development time. So that's the time that you want to take to develop your business to make things better and easier in the future. Now, my suggestion is if you have 4 hours of business development time per week, things are going to get better really quickly because you have a decent chunk of time that's committed to making the business improve. So if you have those 3 big rocks in there, your lunchtime, your family time, and your business development time, things are going to get better really quick. Now, once you've locked in those first 3 big rocks, the best way to flesh out your default diary is to do 2 things. The first thing to do is to create some buckets. So once you've started to measure your time and you've figured out where your time's actually going right now, you'll figure out that there's some things that are quite similar that you do. So if I zoom in into Friday morning, we've got some examples here in front of us. So checking accounts receivable, doing some invoices, doing the wages, those can be bulked into a bucket called wages, or called admin, for example, sorry. So once you've created that bucket, from there, you can essentially do all those things in the same block of time so that your focus can go towards those admin tasks, so that way you can get everything done in a shorter amount of time. Another thing that you can do is you can figure out where you're getting pulled and pushed to, and you can create some time blocks where you can allow that to happen. So in this example, we've got 2 blocks on Monday morning and Tuesday afternoon for on-site quoting. And so if a customer calls this business owner on a Friday morning and he says, "Hey mate, I need you to come and do a quote for me on site right now," this business owner is going to say, "Hey, sorry, I can't do it right now. I can do it Monday morning or Tuesday afternoon." Now that might sound too good to be true, but what you're actually doing is you're giving this customer the power of choice. And so what generally happens is the customer will ring up and they'll be like, "Hey mate, need you to do a quote on site right now." And then we'll be like, "Sorry, I can't get there right now, but I can do this time or this time." And then the client will be like, "And I need you right now, mate. It's really urgent. Hey, I'm so sorry. I can't get there right now, but I can do Monday morning or Tuesday afternoon. Which is going to work best for you?" The client will generally pick one. And the reason for this is that humans actually really hate making decisions. We're not too good at it. It's like when you go into a shop and there's 300 things on the wall, and it's really hard to make a decision because you don't want to muck up that decision because there's so much choice. We get overwhelmed by choice. But if you go into the same shop and there's a choice of one of 2 things, or you get down to one of 2 things, it's quite easy to make that decision because there's not as much overwhelm going on. And it's exactly the same when you position it into those 2 time slots. And it might be 2 or 3 or 4, but hey, if you can get all of your on-site quoting into those 2 time slots, how much time does it get you back? So we call that creating time. One more pro tip for you: if you're doing multiple things in the office, or if you're doing multiple things out on site, if you can get them to be back to back, so you're not going site to office and just traveling all day, that can save you a bunch of time as well. So that's the default calendar for you. Now, if you don't have a copy of the workbook already, make sure you let us know below. Just type plan in the comments or click the button below and we'll get it to you straight away. It's been great fun hanging out, team. We'll catch you soon.
Hey, I hope you liked the video. Check out all the other videos in the channel and like and subscribe.